The man leading Congress's so-called oversight just got called a useful idiot, and not by a pundit but by another member of Congress live on camera. What exploded in that moment wasn't just a political jab, it was the sound of a conspiracy collapsing in real time. Because for years the loudest voices online had built an empire of outrage around one named Jeffrey Epstein. They promised that hidden files would destroy the left, expose the elite, and finally prove every theory they'd ever sold to the public. But when the curtain finally lifted, the story took a turn no one on that side wanted to see. For months, hashtags like "Release the Epstein Files" dominated right-wing media.
And Donald Trump was asked on the campaign trail, should the Jeffrey Epstein files be released? And he said yes. Donald Trump comes into office, and Pam Bondi releases a small portion of the Epstein files that had primarily already been public. There's an uproar on the right and by many, many members of Congress about why the Epstein files were not being released. Pam Bondi says, she writes a memo or an email saying that she wants an explanation for why there aren't more files that are released within 24 hours, and that within 2 weeks she intends to release them. Then the FBI spends tens of thousands of hours going through the files to redact them. Redact, obviously, what you would need to redact, which is the identification information and any other information about the victims. That lasts a couple months. All of a sudden, it goes quiet. It goes quiet. Suddenly, Congresswoman Luna and others who have been pushing so aggressively for the Epstein files to be released decide we're going to stay quiet. And all of a sudden, they're not released. Well, what do we learn next? Oh, we learn, actually, this whole right-wing conspiracy theory is BS. It is bogus, and Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. So now all of a sudden, the Republicans who were so aggressively intent on releasing the Epstein files because they were going to be a huge, explosive story about Democrats involved with Jeffrey Epstein, are quiet. So the irony of these Republicans accusing the Democrats now of only being interested in this is for political purposes is so thick that it is almost sucking us into the quicksand. But let's go a step further. Let's go a step further. Because now the cover-up is getting so deep and so intense that this committee, which has oversight over the Department of Justice and would ordinarily be the one that is doing this investigation, is running away from it. Why? Because Chairman Comer is the useful idiot who will do the cover-up for Donald Trump. And what does that mean? Oh, well, now there is an oversight investigation, but you know what they're not asking for?
Those kind of comments, and he knows that. Gentleman's recognized.
Now, the oversight committee is doing an investigation, but you know what they're not asking for? You know what you did not put in the rule to confirm that investigation? We're not asking for the documents that were used to open the investigation, who provided the information. They're not asking for witness statements, victim witness statements. They're not asking for recordings that may exist. They're not asking for any of the evidence that might include Donald Trump. And rather than acknowledge that you're just trying to cover up for Donald Trump's knowledge and involvement in the Jeffrey Epstein scheme, you're trying to accuse us of being interested. And there's one more point that I will say quickly. This conspiracy theory that you pushed for years is bogus. And when it comes out to the American people that it is bogus, then they will know that all of your other conspiracy theories are also bogus. And your credibility is nil. And I yield back.
Commentators like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino fed the same loop. Democrats were hiding Epstein's connections, the FBI was protecting them, and only their movement would uncover the truth. It was a perfect storm of politics and scandal, until one simple question shattered it. If you wanted the truth so badly, why are you the ones burying it now? That question points straight to a name that kept everything quiet: Pam Bondi. She wasn't some outside actor. She ran the Justice Department's response under the previous administration. When the call came to make the Epstein files public, she released a handful of documents that were mostly old news. A token gesture. Then she promised to open the rest within 2 weeks. The FBI spent months redacting the sensitive parts, preparing for a full release. And just when everyone expected the floodgates to open, silence. No explanation, no follow-up, just nothing. That silence wasn't an accident. It came right after investigators realized what was actually inside those files. It wasn't the bombshell the movement had been hyping for years, it was something far closer to home. Because buried among the names and statements was one that changed everything. The man they'd been defending was now in the story. Suddenly all that righteous fury about transparency vanished. The same lawmakers who'd screamed for openness now acted like they'd never heard of the Epstein files at all. Congresswoman Luna, one of the loudest early voices, went quiet overnight. The media figures who'd turned this saga into a cash-making outrage machine simply pivoted to another headline. And in Washington, the Oversight Committee, the one designed to demand answers, started acting like it didn't even have the authority to ask questions. That's when Representative Dan Goldman stepped in and detonated the narrative. In a few fiery minutes he accused the committee's chair, James Comer, of doing what no one else would say out loud: running cover. Goldman didn't dance around it. He said flat out that Comer had become Trump's useful idiot. Harsh words, but they hit a nerve because they were true to what everyone could see. He laid out the receipts. The committee could demand the full set of unredacted documents, victim statements, and audio evidence. It could subpoena the DOJ for every file that had been mysteriously withheld. But it wasn't doing any of that. Instead, it was staging public hearings about everything except the one story that could touch their own side. Goldman's point was simple but devastating. If the people shouting about cover-ups suddenly stop shouting when the trail leads to them, it's not about justice anymore, it's about control. The same politicians who claimed to defend transparency were now engineering selective blindness. They weren't chasing the truth, they were managing the story. And here's the part that should make every viewer pause. This pattern isn't new. It's how political misinformation has always worked. Take a real tragedy, mix it with just enough truth to make it believable, then build a narrative that fits your side's enemies. The Epstein scandal became the perfect weapon for that formula. The crimes were real, the outrage was justified, but the target was chosen for convenience, not evidence. When reality flipped, the outrage died. Goldman's takedown pulled that hypocrisy into the open. He wasn't defending one party or another, he was exposing the game. Because if one side can bury facts when they become inconvenient, the other side can do it too. That's how trust in government collapses, not through foreign enemies, but through leaders who think truth is optional. Watch how the strategy unfolded. First, amplify outrage. Second, demand exposure. Third, go silent when exposure hits too close. And finally, accuse others of doing exactly what you just did. It's a closed loop that keeps supporters angry, confused, and loyal, even when the facts fall apart. The Epstein files were supposed to bring clarity. Instead, they've become a mirror, reflecting who's really afraid of what might surface. And what Goldman said on that committee floor was a warning. The cover-up isn't about a dead financier anymore. It's about power protecting itself. The Oversight Committee's refusal to chase the evidence tells you everything. They're not asking for victim statements that might link major donors. They're not demanding recordings that could confirm meetings. They're not even verifying which parts of the files were redacted and why. Those are the first steps of any honest investigation, and they've skipped every one of them. Instead, they've turned the story into theater, press conferences, clips for social media, empty sound bites about accountability, all while the truth sits sealed in folders they refuse to touch. If transparency were really the goal, this would have been over years ago. The names would be public. The survivors would have answers. But that's not the goal. The goal is to control what version of the truth people believe. And that's why this moment matters far beyond one committee room. Because what we're watching isn't just political hypocrisy, it's a test of how easily truth can be rewritten in real time. When a conspiracy built on half-facts begins to eat itself, it shows just how fragile the whole system of outrage really is. The silence from the same influencers who built their careers on the Epstein story says it all. They don't need the files anymore, they've already mined the outrage. Now that outrage could turn inward, so the only option is to change the subject. Tomorrow it'll be a new headline, a new scandal, a new promise to reveal what they are hiding. The machine never stops, it just replaces one target with another. That's the real danger. Every time a lie collapses, another one takes its place, and the audience barely notices the swap. What used to be a demand for justice has become entertainment, a cycle that rewards whoever can shout the loudest, not whoever can prove the most. Goldman's words cut through that noise. By calling out the farce in plain language, he forced everyone to confront the obvious. If you only want the truth when it helps you, you don't want the truth at all, you want control. The reaction from the room said it all. Some lawmakers laughed nervously, others glared, but no one actually denied what he said. Because how could they? The facts were sitting right there. The files hadn't been released, the promises hadn't been kept. And the same people who once demanded transparency were now hiding behind procedure. It's a moment that will probably be replayed for months, clipped and spun by both sides. But beyond the politics, it reveals something deeper about the country's addiction to outrage. Every side claimed to fight corruption, yet both depend on it to survive. The truth is messy, complicated and dangerous, and that's exactly why it's the first casualty in every political war. The Epstein scandal is no longer just about one predator or one group of enablers. It's about the way power bends reality, how truth becomes currency, and how the public keeps getting sold recycled outrage as breaking news. And if you're not paying attention, it's easy to become another customer in that endless marketplace of distraction. Goldman's confrontation with Comer wasn't just political theater, it was a warning shot. When he called out the committee for refusing to request key evidence, he was telling the public that oversight has become performance. Real accountability doesn't trend online, it happens quietly, in rooms without cameras. But those rooms only work when someone is willing to ask the uncomfortable questions, and right now almost no one is. That's why the final message of this moment shouldn't be about parties or personalities. It should be about the price of selective truth. Because once we accept that some facts can be ignored for convenience, every fact becomes negotiable. And in that world, corruption doesn't need to hide, it just needs to wait until everyone gets bored. So what started as a viral conspiracy about exposing corruption has ended as a case study in how easily power can twist outrage into silence. The man once promised to release the files now watches as his allies pretend they never existed. The committee that was supposed to demand answers has turned into a shield, and the victims, the real people whose suffering started this story, are still waiting for justice while politicians trade insults for cameras. Maybe that's the most haunting part. The people at the center of this case aren't trending anymore, and the only thing left is the noise of partisanship. But if this hearing proved anything, it's that silence can be louder than words, and that sometimes the truth doesn't need defending, it just needs to be seen. Because in the end every cover-up has an expiration date. Lies can stall, distract and delay, but they can't rewrite reality forever. The truth always leaks, and when it does, the same voices that built the conspiracy will pretend they never believed it at all. Until then, moments like this when someone dares to say what others won't, are reminders that even in a room full of spin, facts still have a pulse. It's faint, buried under noise, but it's there. Waiting. If you've been following these breakdowns, you already know we don't do hype. We follow the evidence, we trace the contradictions, and we show how power hides in plain sight. If you're new here, now's the time to join the conversation. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and turn on notifications, because the next time a cover-up hits the headlines, you'll know exactly how to see through it.